You know, some of the most interesting stories in tech happen when one country just zigs while the rest of the world zags. And boy, did that happen in the 1980s. While the global video game industry was heading in one direction, the United Kingdom went down this completely different path, and in doing so, created this amazing, unique, and weirdly influential world all of its own. Okay, so let's get right into it because this is the big mystery we're going to unpack. Pretty much everyone has heard about the great video game crash of '83 in America. It was an absolute meltdown. The whole industry just imploded. But at that exact same time, something totally different, something really special, was just starting to bubble up across the Atlantic. So, what on earth was going on? And this slide just lays it out perfectly. On one side of the pond, you have total catastrophe. But in the UK, you have this thriving, booming scene. The key difference was that the British market wasn't built around expensive game consoles like the Atari. Nope, it was all about affordable, do-it-all home computers. It was a completely different universe. Now, this whole divergence thing wasn't just some happy accident. It was more like a very specific recipe, a kind of perfect storm of conditions that created this incredible environment for games and creativity to just explode. So let's break down the three secret ingredients that made it all possible. It really boils down to three huge things. First, people were extremely price sensitive. British families were definitely watching every penny. Second, you have the unsung hero of this story, the humble cassette tape. They were super cheap to make and to buy, and they became the engine of the whole software market. And third, and this was crucial, there was this big national push for computer literacy. Parents were convinced these things were educational, not just toys. Okay, get a load of this, because the price difference shown here is just staggering. A single cartridge game in the US could set you back £40. Meanwhile, in the UK, you could literally walk into your local newsagent and grab a brand new game on a cassette tape for just £1.99. I mean, that's not just a small difference. That one economic fact changed everything. And because distribution was so cheap, this brand new thing emerged, the bedroom coder. Think about it. Because it was so easy to make and sell games, teenagers could literally code up these wild, innovative games in their bedrooms and actually get them published. This culture turned the UK into this absolute software powerhouse, and it's where legends who would go on to create things like Grand Theft Auto first got their start. So we've got the why. Now let's dig into the what. Let's look at the actual machines that powered this whole crazy era. And trust me, these weren't just gadgets. For a whole generation of British kids, these were cultural icons. And right at the very heart of it all was this little beauty, the Sinclair ZX Spectrum. For just 125 quid, it was probably the most important computer in British history. It had this iconic, and let's be real, super weird, rubbery keyboard. It felt like you were typing on bubble wrap. But we loved it. It brought color, sound, and the ability to code to the masses. But, and this is a big but, for all its genius, the Spectrum had this one famous, almost beloved technical flaw. It was this visual quirk that every single person who owned one knew intimately, and it basically defined the look of British games for years. It was called attribute clash. Now, to get this, you have to remember that computer memory back then was incredibly precious and expensive. So to save space, the designers made this clever but flawed trade-off. Instead of giving every single pixel its own color, they assigned colors to bigger blocks of pixels. It worked, but it had a very, very noticeable side effect. And this visual shows you exactly how it worked. See that little 8x8 pixel square? Well, the computer could only put two colors inside it. That's it. So if your little yellow character here ran in front of that blue wall, any part of the wall that he touched would suddenly flash yellow too. It was a glitch, it was a flaw, but honestly, it became part of the machine's iconic style, and it forced developers to be unbelievably creative. Of course, the Spectrum didn't have the playground all to itself. Oh no, its popularity sparked what was probably the biggest schoolyard rivalry of the 1980s, a head-to-head battle that literally divided friends and families. It was a true clash of the titans. So, in one corner, you had the Sinclair ZX Spectrum, the cheap, cheerful, scrappy British favorite. And in the other corner, you had the Commodore 64, the bigger, more powerful, and way more expensive American rival. And yup, you guessed it, it all came down to price again. The Speccy launched at 125 quid. The Commodore 64, a massive 399 pounds. I mean, that price gap was a chasm. It basically defined which tribe you belonged to. You were either a Speccy kid or a C64 kid. There was no in between. And the differences were just night and day. For sound, the Spectrum had a tiny little beeper that basically just went beep and boop. The Commodore 64, though, it had the legendary SID chip. This thing was a proper 3-voice synthesizer. The music it made was so incredible that the composers, guys like Rob Hubbard, they became actual rock stars. When it came to graphics, it was another battleground. The Spectrum could draw really sharp, high-resolution images, which was fantastic for slower, more thoughtful games. But you always had that dreaded attribute clash. The C64, on the other hand, was built for speed. It had special hardware for moving objects around smoothly, which made it an absolute monster for fast arcade games. But hey, it wasn't just a two-horse race. The UK scene was buzzing with different machines. You had the BBC Micro, which was kind of the serious, brainy one you'd find in every single school. And then there was the Amstrad CPC 464, which was just a genius bit of design. It came with its own monitor and tape deck, all built into one unit. But, all good parties have to come to an end. Towards the late 80s, the home computer party was about to get some new guests. A new challenge was sailing in, all the way from Japan. And what's wild is that even here, the UK did its own thing. Around the world, the Nintendo Entertainment System was the undisputed king, but its UK launch was kind of messy and delayed. So Sega, who everyone already knew and loved from the arcades, swooped in with their Master System, and for a long time, it actually outsold Nintendo in Britain. So this has been a fun trip down memory lane, right? But why does any of this 8-bit history matter today? Well, what if I told you there's a crazy twist to this story? One that connects one of these clunky, old beige computers directly to the super powerful device you're probably holding in your hand right now. Yeah, seriously. Okay, so follow the breadcrumbs here. Remember that BBC computer literacy project we mentioned? Well, the BBC picked a British company called Acorn to build their official school computer, the BBC Micro. And a few years later, when Acorn was working on its successor, they stumbled onto something that would change the world. That research led to this, the ARM architecture. It was a brand new, revolutionary way to design a processor. The big idea was to make it incredibly powerful, but also to just sip electricity instead of guzzling it. And that whole philosophy was born directly out of this unique British home computer scene. And here is the absolute punchline. That little idea, born from a project to get educational computers into British schools, created the processor architecture that now powers virtually every single smartphone, tablet, and wearable on the planet. I'm not exaggerating. There's a direct, unbroken line from that beige box in a 1980s classroom to the supercomputer in your pocket. When you really look back, the whole point of this era was creation. These machines were affordable, they were open, and they practically begged an entire generation to not just consume, but to create, to make their own stuff. It just makes you wonder, in our modern world of lockdown devices and curated app stores, what's our version of that? What's the tool that's empowering today's bedroom coders to build the future? It's a fascinating question to think about.